Okay, morning everyone. So first of all, thank you to John Souter for inviting me to talk today, and thank you to you all for attending my presentation. I'm going to talk today a little bit of the story of Zen over the last 23 years, and alongside that a little bit of the story of the internet, and I'll finish off with some thoughts on the future. But before I get going with the story of Zen and the internet, I want to just everyone to cast their minds back to 1995. 23 years isn't much time in the grand scheme of things, but things, of course, were very different back then. So the internet was a novelty for computer geeks back then. If you wanted to send an email to your colleagues at work, well, you couldn't because there wasn't any email. What you had to do is fire up your word processor, type a memo, print it out, put it in one of these orange envelopes, and write the distribution list. And of course, you'd pass it to the first person, and they would know that once they'd read it, they'd pass it to the next person, etc. If you wanted to send a document to your customers or suppliers, then the fax machine was the technology of choice because it was just so much faster than putting things in the post. Before I started Zen, I used to design computer hardware. I worked for a little business in Kingston-on-Thames. There's about 50 of us, and we shared 3 PCs in that office. So the vast majority of my work, including figuring out all the timing diagrams, was done with pen and paper and a bookshelf full of data books. Back then, there were no smartphones, there was no social media, so when friends and family went out to the restaurant, they used to engage in conversation. Of course, things are pretty different these days. So, if I look, that was 1995, and if I look back over the 23 years of Zen's history, there are 3 phases that stand out for me, that I can break them down. And by coincidence, those phases were punctuated for Zen with 3 different buildings as well. And I'll be interested to hear from you guys to what extent you recognize these 3 phases in the growth of the internet from your experience. So phase 1, startup. Second phase, exponential growth. Third phase, service diversification. In the first phase, startup, about 5 years for Zen. And how did it start? It started with a chat in the pub. So this is a recreation I did for a recent blog article. I said to my brother Dan, "Do you think the internet will take off?" He said, "Well, yeah, I reckon it will." Well, we're northern, you see. So, do you fancy setting up an ISP? Yeah, all right, let's do it. So, and it was dead easy back then to set up an ISP. We said, yeah, cheers, let's do it. And we rented this small office in Rochdale, just behind this wall, little box room, no windows, and set up an ISP. Now, setting up an ISP back in those days was not too difficult. So we got 6 telephone lines, 6 US robotics courier modems to plug them into, a couple of Linux PCs, a hub, a router, which was just a PC running Linux and some routing software, a 64 kilobit per second BTnet internet leased line, and a wooden shelf from IKEA to put all that kit on. And then we opened our doors for business. Now, back then, superfast was 28.8 kilobits per second. And it was interesting back then to think that people were saying, you know what, 28.8K is the theoretical physical maximum amount of data you're going to get across a copper pair that was never designed to carry data. Interesting today that with GFast, a 330 meg GFast line is about 12,000 times faster over that same bit of copper that's been in the ground for 50, 60, however many years. So that was our initial network. We got going. The early years of Zen were like running up a down escalator. Every day the money was going out, and like any startup business, you want to get the money coming in faster than it's going out. We work really hard, we work long hours, And that pretty much, it was a bit of a blur those early years. Lots of driving down to the generation centre at 3 a.m. because we got a little pager message saying something had broken. Next little anecdote I wanted to cover off was a threat that became an opportunity. So back in those early days, what we were selling was internet access, £10 a month, dial-up. Here's one of our adverts in Internet Today magazine. And one of my early worries was that, one of the big guys is going to realise that the internet has got something going for it. And I thought it was going to be either BT or Microsoft were going to say, you know what, let's give it away for free for a couple of years, 3 years, all the little players go out of business and then we'll have the market to ourselves. Actually, it did happen. It was in autumn 98. It wasn't BT or Microsoft, it was Dixon's that launched FreeServe back then and started giving away internet access for free. And within a couple of weeks of that launch, we started getting customers ringing up saying, we really like you, but you're charging us £10 a month. Look, over here it's free. I'm sorry, but we're going. I was like, oh no, is this the beginning of the end? And in fact, it was quite the opposite, because over the next year, we more than doubled our turnover from 439,000 to 929,000. We made our first ever profit, which was, my God, at last, I can stop borrowing money from friends and family and actually start paying them back a little bit. But why was that? And there was a couple of key reasons for it. So the first reason was it forced us to focus on providing services to our small business customers. And the B2B business was more profitable than B2C. We were selling ISDN access. We were selling premium services, domain names of websites and things like that. And the other thing is FreeServe catalyzed a massive growth in consumer internet use, because now you didn't have to make that financial outlay. It was pay-as-you-go with the local phone call charges. So there's a massive growth in usage. It drove massive demand for business-grade services then from those businesses that wanted to serve that increased consumer base. FreeServe didn't provide those services, but we did, so the demand was really ramping up. So it was really a good example of a threat from a business point of view that became a good opportunity for us. So that was phase one. Phase two, exponential growth of the internet. And for Zen, that was from about 2000 to 2008. And again, just sort of helping everyone to remember what was happening back then. So in 2000, what did we have? We had the Y2K bug. So everyone was really hyped up about that, and it didn't really come to very much in the end. There was the dot-com boom and bust when a number of companies in the US achieved tremendous valuations based on hype and then went bust. So boo.com was one of those. But importantly for the UK, ADSL broadband was launched, and that was in the summer of 2000. So for the first time, you could be online all the time rather than choosing to be online and then using your phone line up when you were online using a modem. Most people in the UK didn't use the internet in 2000. Wind forward to 2008. First thing I remember, 2008, the financial crisis. What else happened? Apple released the iPhone 3G, their second generation iPhone. And by that point, only 8 years later, the internet's a necessity for most people. If I look at the turnover growth that we saw during those 8 years, the first 4 years, we were round about doubling our turnover every year. 1, 2, 3.5 million, 7.8 million, 14.2 million. And then after that, we had a rapid growth for the second 4 years. So really felt like riding that wave of growth where there was such an increase in demand for services that it didn't matter how many suppliers there were. And there were lots of suppliers, lots of ISPs starting up, lots of acquisitions going on in that time as well. And brings us on to our second building. So in the generation centre, it was a great starting place, had no windows, it was stuffy, really hot in the summer. And I thought, if we're going to be a successful high-tech company, we need a successful high-tech looking building with glass and aluminium, and so we built this. By coincidence, the office next to mine in the generation centre was an architect, so I got chatting to that guy, and in the 4 years from 97 to 2001, we built this building. So moved into that, but with about 30 people. It had capacity for about 65. When we filled that up, we rented a floor in the middle of Rochdale on this building, and we then filled that up, and we rented some space in some more shared office accommodation just down the road. So that was a second phase of growth for Zen. And then the third phase was service diversification. So up to that point, 90-odd% of our business was just supplying broadband services. And from 2008, over the last 10 years, service diversification has been really the key for us. And so in terms of the new services that we've launched, I mean, and you recognise all these MPLS, IPVPNs, we've done a whole load of stuff around cloud based on our own infrastructure, which is Nutanix-based and VMware. We've done a load of stuff with AWS. We've not really done very much with Azure so far. But all these services so far. Colo, not much to say about that. Broad software, so we partnered with Vanilla IP to provide a hosted voice service based on BroadSoft, and started selling mobile phones, SIM cards, started doing more stuff with security, firewall management, proactive security management for our bigger customers, and more recently outsourced managed IT services. And we're trialing SD-WAN at the moment. So a really proliferation of services based on the internet. Building-wise, we had another building. So we had the great fortune of having the opportunity to buy this building in 2008, which we did. So we consolidated 3 sites into one. The building that we're in now has got capacity for over 1,000 people, so lots of space to grow. It was originally built by the Co-op, opened in the mid-90s by Tony Blair, and I always thought the Co-op was a frugal organisation, but absolutely not at all. I can see one head shaking there. They built it like a palace, really, and they, in that building, there was a chairman's office, and I walked into it. I thought, my goodness, hand-built furniture, and the facility, the head of buildings and security back then said, "That should be your office." I said, "There's no way I'm sitting in there," but a really nice office nonetheless. So that brings me on to a very important thing for Zen, which is our most fundamental long-term objectives. And this story starts on a paragliding holiday that I went on to Bhutan. So I've been paragliding nearly 20 years now. And just for a bit of a geography, Bhutan is this little country here. So it's sandwiched between China and India. And while I was on that holiday, as well as paragliding, we did some sightseeing. We learned a bit more about the country. One thing that was really interesting about the country was the way that the king of Bhutan measured the success of his country. And most of the Western world measure the success of their economies and their country based on GDP growth. And he said, you know what? I'm much less concerned with the GDP growth of my country. What I'm more concerned is how happy everybody is. I'm interested in GNH, gross national happiness. And when I heard that, I thought, that really strikes a chord with me, because isn't it the case that from a very, very young age, we are bombarded with imagery that tells us that the more money we have and the more we consume and the more possessions that we accumulate, the happier we will be. And of course, it's not true. And the king of Bhutan knew it was not true, and he said, "So I'm not concerned with this. This is what I'm concerned about." And it was a very sorted philosophy in my view. So I came back from that holiday and I thought, right, I'm going to pitch to the senior team. I want to reset our objectives for the company, and that's what we did in 2008. So we set 3 most fundamental long-term objectives, which in priority order are happy staff, happy customers, and happy suppliers. And what I say is these 3 fundamental objectives are the reason that Zen exists as a company. Everything that we do should contribute ultimately to one of these objectives. The foundations for everything we do. And it's a formula, ironically, that has delivered great financial success for us, because it means that we focus on making the right decisions for the long-term happiness of our staff, customers, and suppliers. So if you look at what that's delivered over the last 10 years since we set the objectives, so Zen today, if we look at our we've just had a year end, the end of September. We turned over 71 million, which was a growth of 11%. We grew our profits to 3 million. We grew our EBITDA to 6 million. So financially, we're doing well. We're very solid financially. And we have 490 staff, just under 500 at the moment. We're going to add 83 in the next 12 months if we can recruit them all. And on the subject of recruitment, we're just about to open another office in the city centre of Leeds to expand our catchment area for getting the skills that we need to grow the business. In terms of the business, we are divided into 3 divisions. The first is Zen Retail, so this looks after our consumers, our small business and our channel. We've got Zen Business that looks after larger business, complex solutions, and we've got Zen Wholesale that resells access into our LLU network. Another thing that happened recently that affected me a lot was I swapped roles with our chairman. So I've been the CEO of Zen for many, many years, and I decided that starting at the 1st of October, we were going to swap. I was going to become the chairman, and Paul Stobart was going to become the CEO. Now Paul is probably best known as the CEO of Sage Northern Europe, and as part of Sage's executive team, he took Sage from a £100 million business to a £1.3 billion business. And I thought, you know what, here's a guy that uncannily, he shares my values about business, and he's grown businesses from Zen size to much bigger than Zen size. He could do my job potentially better than I could do it, and it would free me up to do other things to promote Zen, to grow Zen, and to pursue some other interests that I have as well. So we made that swap. Now, growth so far has been completely organic growth. We've been open to acquisitions, but we've not found one yet that fits into our strategy and that fits with our culture. Something that we're sort of looking at in the background. We've competed, of course, in a really competitive market, and the reason that we've been successful over so many years is we've differentiated our service. And I think that focus on people and continual improvement has meant our service quality has shone out, and we've won a number of awards for our service over the years, and also as an employer. So that differentiation is critical, again, not just for our success so far, but our success in the long-term future. I thought, since this is a LINX event, I better talk a bit about our network. It's going to be very high level. So one of the most interesting things, I guess, about Zen is that we've built to 400 telephone exchanges. I'll say LLU, but actually we're much interested in fibre parent exchanges than LLU copper. And we had this little thing in our reception area a while back as a thing to measure the progress of our project, and every time we did another exchange, we put another green ping pong ball in, and we got to 400 quite some time ago. Now with 400 live exchanges, about 2/3 of our fibre broadband is on net, and about half our Ethernet is on net. So altogether, we supply around about 130,000 broadband lines today. We've had a lot of success with this. We're going to do more. We've got 50 more exchanges in build, and in our strategy, we've got more still. So key part of our strategy, certainly for Zen, In terms of our core network, we've got two. So our original core network was based on Juniper with Ericsson for the broadband. And then about 3 years ago, we came to the conclusion we need to build a new core network. We chose to partner with Huawei to do that for both the core network and the broadband. The network we've got in place will scale to 600 gigabits per second, which is a number that I can't quite get my head around, but it will see us for a few years to come. Actually, it will only be a few years because I'm sure that all of you in the room share a challenge of continually needing to upgrade capacity, which actually I'll touch on a bit later. So that was the end of phase 3, really, and the 3 phases of Zen's growth. And as I said, that I'll be interested to hear, maybe in the break, to what extent you associate with those 3 phases in your experience. I wanted to finish with just a few thoughts for the future, both for Zen and for the internet. So, okay, let's start off with the future of Zen. Top of my list, stay true to the values. Happy staff, happy customers, happy suppliers. That is etched in stone forever as far as I'm concerned. It's about putting people first and money second. Because of this, because I feel so strongly about this, I wouldn't sell Zen for all the tea in China. I own 100% of Zen. I like tea. But there is seriously no amount of money that would make me sell that business ever. And it's because I believe so strongly in the values that we've set up. I've had the luxury in a way of being able to create a bubble of a culture that is, I guess, a bit different. And I'm very keen to keep that culture. Now, just in case that sounds a bit, well, I don't think it will do. So in terms of our future potential, so we're, as well as wanting to keep the business, the values, I'm very ambitious for the business. Now, we set up this little business 23 years ago. I want to see just how far can we take this business. And I want to maximize the opportunities that we have, realize our full potential. I want us to be working really hard, making the best decisions for the long-term future. And for most of this year, we've been working with the new CEO, Paul, to devise a 5-year strategy that will see our turnover grow from this year's number of 71 million up to 150 million. And this isn't just an aspiration now. There's detailed year-by-year plans of how we're going to deliver that turnover target. Now, that's all based, again, on the organic growth model. If we do end up acquiring or partnering, then we've got the opportunity to exceed even that number. So very big ambitions for the future. And all achievable in a market that's continually changing, evolving, and where new opportunities are surfacing. And then finally, let's have a look at the future of the internet generally. And I thought to talk about this. I thought let's have a talk about Gordon Moore, the creator of Moore's Law, who in 1965 said the number of transistors on a chip is going to double every year. And in 1975, he changed that to 2 years. It doubles about every 2 years. And he only forecast that forward, I think, for the next decade when he originally said it. But actually, it's held true pretty much right up to this day. So here's a graph that shows various, I think they're all CPUs, actually, various CPUs all the way up to, and the number of transistors on a chip. So all a continuing exponential growth there. Now, the number of transistors in a chip is slowing down slightly, so it's going from 2 years towards 2.5, not quite 3 years, in terms of doubling the amount of transistors. But having said that, it's very clear, and certainly from my point of view, I'm sure many of you share this, is that for many decades to come, we're going to see continued exponential growth in compute power, memory and storage, and bandwidth. And one of the examples that I want to just pull out of many is a white paper that Cisco published last year. It's entitled The Zettabyte Era, and they were predicting a 24% compound annual growth rate between up to 2021. So that's a doubling about every 3 years and 2.5 months. You would double the amount of global IP traffic. So what does that mean? And there's some real obvious stuff that it means. Okay, we're going to get even bigger TVs. They're going to be even higher definition. What comes after 4K, 8K, so I don't know, whatever. But something's going to come after it. And of course, there'll be huge increases in video bandwidth across the internet because of that. But what's much more interesting is what are all the things that are going to happen over the next 23 years that we have absolutely no clue about today. And you might think, no, we can predict stuff now. But if you go back 23 years and look back to that first slide, who sitting here could possibly have predicted everything that the internet has delivered and how it's changed society, how it's changed business? I mean, I certainly couldn't have done that. And, we've got every reason to believe that over the next 23 years, we're going to see equally radical changes or even more radical changes catalyzed by the internet and the growth in technology. And so it will deliver, just as it has in the last 23 years, far-reaching opportunities and challenges. Actually, we've got more far-reaching opportunities and challenges ahead. Now, I thought I'd finish by one thing that I will predict, which is a little bit out there, but I'm going to do it anyway. So it's not the development of artificial intelligence itself, but I predict the development of real intelligence, RI, or maybe TI, true intelligence. Maybe you just want to call it intelligence. So in my view, true intelligence within a computer system will be developed in the not too distant future. We might even develop consciousness. Now, there's lots of philosophical debates behind that statement. And so, there's a number of views out there on whether that will or will not happen or when it might happen. I thought I just want to share this one, which was from an AI talk that we did in Zen pretty recently, from Stephen Hawking 3 years ago at a conference in London. He said, computers will overtake humans with AI within the next 100 years. When that happens, we need to make sure the computers have goals aligned with ours. I think if you were going to put me on the spot of what I think it's going to be quicker than that. The most specific I'm going to get, I think within the next few decades, we're going to crack true intelligence. So, when that happens, what part will the internet play? I mean, AI is of a particular interest to me, and one of the things that I think in my new role is pretty much top of the list of something I want to pursue within Zen. What part will the internet play? Okay. So let's reference a few films, because we all like the movies, sci-fi movies. So will it be like Terminator 3 even, where Skynet is the internet? It's not a mainframe in a bunker. Or will it be like iRobot, where Vicky is like sort of a mainframe somewhere that you can go in and it's in one room and you can go and destroy her because she's doing bad stuff? Or will it be like Chappie, where the brain is all in a robot's head? And I don't know. And actually, does it really matter? So whether the internet is the brain or is used just as a learning and communications medium between different brains around the planet, the implication for the human race will be revolutionary when this happens. And in my view, it will be the biggest change to society since the Industrial Revolution. It's going to provide potentially enormous opportunities and enormous benefits actually for the human race, but also potentially enormous challenges. And on that thought, thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Hi, it's Giles Phelps from Spectrum Internet. We actually came up to see you a few weeks back, and I can completely acknowledge what you're saying about the happiness element. Certainly visiting Zen was very different to any other ISP that we've met. But in your AI bit, I'm just intrigued. You're very much about happiness, happy staff, happy suppliers, happy customers. Do you think that when you're talking about consciousness, that AI will be interested in happiness?
Well, I think we need to do our best to make sure that it is. There was one, that I picked out that Stephen Hawking anecdote. There was one other one in that presentation that said something along the lines of, when this true intelligence happens, it won't be concerned with happiness, sadness, what's right or wrong, what's good or bad for humans. It will just see humans as a bunch of molecules that could be deployed for better purposes. So now, whether or not, obviously that's a bit of a doomsday view, it's a massive challenge for AI, because you're going to create something that has the ability to learn and act. And so when you're teaching AI, you give it a good goal and you give it a bad goal. So a lot of AI is being developed around games. So Google's Deep Thought, playing chess with itself 44 million times and becoming the best chess player on the planet, for example. And you started off with a system where it didn't know the rule. It didn't even know the rules of the game, but it played and it played and it played, and it got better and better, and it learned the rules as it went along. So if you give it a goal, then it will just keep refining and developing rules to head towards that goal. So if you give it goals around the ethics that stand today in society, and it adheres to those goals, then we should be okay. And bear in mind, what we think is right or wrong in society today evolves. It's continually evolving. One example I always give is I say, do you believe it's right that women are allowed to vote? And it's like, well, what sort of question of that? Of course women should be allowed to vote. Women and men should have equal rights. But you go back 100 years, and society in the UK accepted that that wasn't the case. It's changed. So, of course, our values change, and whatever we create will need to align to those, they're evolving values. If you developed that AI and it got into the hands of someone who wanted to use that for bad purposes, and you gave it a chopping knife, you say, right, chop that carrot. Okay, this is how you do it. Chop that potato, chop that piece of meat, chop that person's finger off. How do you teach it that, no, that's crossing the line? And it's really difficult. I think it's the challenges that we have to face. But you can't be a Luddite. We can't say, ooh, it's still too scary, we're not going to do it. Because someone will do it, will crack this problem. And I think we'll have some really big challenges. So I guess from my point of view, my focus is we need to work really hard to make sure we get the benefits and minimize all the bad stuff. And of course, with every development in technology, there's going to be a bad side to it.
I don't know. Have we got time for another question or not? Is there time for another question? Because I'm ready. I can ask you privately, but you want to move on, Joe? Because we're 5 minutes over time.
Yeah, I mean, ask the question. I think that's
okay.
Right. Malcolm said he'd be brief.
Okay.
I'll try and keep the answer a bit shorter as well.
Excuse me while I faint. Okay. Richard, thanks for a great presentation. In 1984, I went to a presentation in Sun Microsystems Labs in Palo Alto, and the head of R&D said it's logical that within the next 10 years, the interface between the computer and the human being will be an implant in the brain with computing power growth and miniaturization. It was just logical. Now, that hasn't happened, but you still see something like that. And it does get you into some of the movies that you're talking about, but it still seems to me kind of logical that that would be something to do. And it basically said that you would have the capacity to remember everything you'd ever experienced. Yeah, like, we probably have got it all on it, it's just accessing it, it's difficult. Putting that together with this, I mean, with the AI and other stuff, do you still see something like that? How will we interface, I suppose, with technology is what I'm getting at as a question.
Well, I think we're going to probably end up using what we're used to using in language, expression, the written word. I think in terms of implants in the brain, could it be done? I think much less likely because of the complexity of the neural structure of the brain, interfacing into that and seeing thoughts. I can't see that happening because how could you connect to it all? There's not like an RS-232 socket where you can take it all out at 1200 baud or whatever. And I do think that when we develop the AI, a lot of research now is focused on neural nets, and I think when we crack this, I don't think it'll be neural net based. I think it'll be structured in a different way, and so it's the interface to us will be very slow. The interface between brains around the planet will be very fast. And I think that's where, if AI is going to surpass our ability to reason, then the speed that it can do that will be key. And I guess going back to the analogy of the comment about Google's deep thought learning chess, it played 44 million chess games with itself over the period of 11 hours and then became the best chess computer on the planet. So it sort of shows you how quickly a piece of technology today can go from not even knowing the rules of the game to becoming the best machine, or certainly better than any human on the planet. And I think, of course, now Google's technology I think will be obsolete actually within 10 years because 44 million games is very slow learning. Although it can do it very quickly, it's very slow learning when you take deep thought out of that confined environment of just playing a chess game to the much more complex real world. You need to be able to learn faster. So humans don't need to play millions of games before becoming exceptionally good at playing a game. And I think when we crack AIs will require much fewer games to develop that that level of capability. So I don't know if are we out of time?
John's
I just want to have a quick last word. I want to thank you, Richard, on behalf of all of us for that. I've been trying to persuade Richard to come and present to us for a very long time, and you can see why now. I thought it was incredibly entertaining and informative first half, and then the idea that we were going to get into philosophy in the second half was, a little surprise, shall we say. But actually, the LINX senior management team had an extremely entertaining presentation when we were last on the West Coast. On machine learning and its application in networking, and I was actually hoping to get that same person to come to one of our quarterly meetings, but that logistically is quite hard because he's West Coast based. But I mean, based on the way Richard has whetted our appetite there, can I see a show of hands if we want to try and develop more material of this kind, particularly if it's ML and if much more directly practical, is it? Yeah, I suspected that would be the response. So thank you, Richard. I think you've stimulated something there as well. So thank you on behalf of us all.
Thank you very much.